Is so much scamming being mentioned around you. You know, what's interesting? The people who I scammed out of money, out of whatever I scammed them out of, where they at? Where they post at? Where they stuff at? Why we ain't heard from them? Think about it. Then start shouting. Huh?
So with that, this video and all of this that's going on, this whole series, and what you might see on social media, I'm having a lot of sidebar conversations. You know, I get some trolls here or there, where people think that this is just all about ish and giggles or just stirring up some internet drama. This is so much bigger than that. There's real work happening with this, because this may finally be the opportunity for them to finally get their money and maybe a little bit more. So the call to action for this video is that if you did any business dealings with him back in Chicago, what you would need to do is contact the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to file a complaint. And I'll have the link to the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission in our description area below, as well as I'm gonna try to remember to pin it in our comment section.
I declare by the time I turn 30 years old, I will have at least $1 million.
You hungry? Let's make a snack.
Hey, poppin' like I'm supposed to. Watch out for the people that ain't close to. Speak a little something you could toast to. I ain't tryna hear about what you won't do. Moving like I'm into. Hit the ground running like the rent do. Speak a little something that you're into. I ain't tryna hear about what you've been through. Like, hold
and
on,
I remember it was more of an after work sort of meeting. And I recall that the turnout was actually really good. I wanna say there were easily 40 to 60 people there. So at the meeting, Darius was charismatic as usual, pulling all the snake oil salesman's tricks out of his hat. And once again, I was very impressed with the public figure version of Darius, because at that time I was used to the regular, goofy, and sometimes juvenile, yet enjoyable to be around Darius. That was who I knew. Nevertheless, for Darius, this was a pretty successful start to his first major scam and crime. Now, from what Darius told me back then, I think he had secured about 16 investors during that particular pitch meeting. And they invested various amounts, with $2,000 per 1% share being his minimum to get in on the investment deal, with him maintaining a 51% ownership share. And even my best friend, who was a CPA for a major corporation, ended up investing with Darius, even after having a private conversation where he pretty much grilled Darius about the investment. Even with that, and with Darius not really truly being able to hold his own completely in that conversation, because of knowing me and the fact that Darius is a really good, charismatic snake oil salesman, he ended up against his own better judgment, still investing with Darius, just not as much as he would have done originally. So because of that, I got my friend caught up as a victim of one of Darius's crimes as well. And truthfully, the reason I was so trustworthy of Darius is because to that point, he had never done anything to make me really mistrust him as far as our friendship went. And he didn't do anything for another, I think, year after that. Darius was definitely more egotistical and a bit more selfish than he was when we were dating years before, but he never asked me for anything financial, and even treated me out to eat occasionally, even when we were just friends. So basically, the only thing that I could say that Darius ever robbed me of prior to at the very end was my time. And the truth is, I gave of it freely. Now, there were times when I realized I was giving him too much time, but that was on me 100%. And it was just because, you know, I enjoyed being around him, but I also wanted to support him in what he needed. And at that time, on top of that, he didn't have a vehicle. So some of what he was doing required transportation, and because I was around him a lot and, you know, I was just there. I was there for him. And through that experience, I've gotten better at controlling that with other people. So thank you, Darius. Now, fast forward to the close of this investment deal. Darius put a certain end date on when people could invest. So by the time that it was over, Darius claims that he had raised $60,000 in capital from his Cupcake Gallery investors. However, by the time that he had raised the capital for the Cupcake Gallery location, he had found a new location on the north side of Chicago in the Uptown neighborhood, which somewhat has a New York style neighborhood vibe to it. It is a very diverse area where you have people of various socioeconomic levels living amongst each other. However, this change of location also changed Darius's business model. Out of nowhere, Darius seemed to have switched his business model from his customer base of Black, primarily church-going women who were traveling from all stretches of the Chicagoland area to come to his apartment to buy cupcakes, to all of a sudden white women were his base, because I guess at that time he considered himself to be moving on up to Uptown. And this was very evident in his first marketing campaign as he was creating all of his promotional materials. One of his first tasks was to cast models to take photos with his cupcakes for all of his various advertising and promotional materials. Now, the issue with this is in his casting call, he specifically only wanted white women. And so one of his followers messaged him and pointed out to him that his base was Black women. And so why was he only wanting white women in his promotional materials? And again, Darius, being a know-it-all and being who he is, had a very curt response for her in his normal way that he responds when he doesn't appreciate someone giving him any level of advice. And in his 3-paragraph long response, he basically then goes on to tell her that African Americans don't eat cupcakes on a regular basis, and that his average customer was a white woman with kids who stays at home with her husband who works. And she typically has a dog, and she takes her kids out in the daytime for a stroll in the neighborhood with a stroller that costs no less than $300. I don't know why that's important. And it's not effing true either. How about that? Like some like stereotypical stuff. Like a white woman, just because she's a white woman, she got a $300 stroller. Okay. So then he goes on to say, does that sound like your typical Black woman? Basically having a husband, children, I guess a dog, being able to stay at home if she chooses, and being able to own a stroller that costs, I guess, at least $300. I guess that doesn't sound like a Black woman. I mean, I guess he says typical, so he's saying not very many Black women have that at all. And then he goes on to say, how many Black women in your neighborhood are married, stay at home with their kids, have a dog, and take their children out for a walk in the daytime for a stroll in the neighborhood in an expensive stroller? And then he says he's sure that the woman he's responding with would not know many. And then he goes further in this rant where he actually fills in the pieces for some other things that come up later on, where he says, I am not a marketing professional by any means. I'm a brand new entrepreneur that was thrown into business ownership by accident. And what he means by that is that he was unemployed, cupcakes took off, and he realized that was a way to be able to make some money. And then he says, I am glad I landed on my feet. And he's talking about basically having the Cupcake Gallery at that point. That was brand new. It really hadn't even really started. I don't even know if it was, maybe it was open, but it definitely wasn't popular at that point. And he says, here's another key one. Oh, Jesus. Another contradiction and flat out lie that he was telling way back in, this had to be what, 2011, I think it was. 2010, 2011. But anyway, he says, in fact, I got a degree in a completely different area of study. And he says, biblical studies. And he says, so I'm using common sense as my team and I build this marketing campaign. I think he meant Christy because he never had a team. But anyway, yes, he mentions the biblical studies degree. Again, I told you guys in the previous video that he was telling that lie because we have the proof from the Moody Bible Institute that he did not graduate with a degree from that school. And so we now see that he was telling that lie way back in around 2010, which I kind of mentioned that I had heard things about it around that time because we were still cool. And it wasn't making sense to me because I'm like, when were you able to get this degree that I don't know about you going to school for? So yeah, it was a whole thing. Well, and it definitely like going to school and graduating. Like I remember him going to school at times, but never completing. So yeah, there's that. And we see in that, besides the lie about having a degree in biblical studies, that at that point, when he moved his Cupcake gallery up to the north side, he was ready to abandon the base that built him, which was black women, for white women who he felt would, I guess, make him richer on the north side of Chicago, which again is probably why he did not take the location that was only a couple doors down from his church, because that was in the heart of the west side of Chicago. Well, it was really off of a L line, so he would have definitely still got some diversity, but not the kind, well, he didn't want diversity. He wanted white women with $300 strollers and kids and a husband that works. So we get to see that for Darius, it was not about his base. It wasn't about a loyalty to the people who actually helped build him up and get him to the position that he could actually do what he wanted, which was, you know, be entrepreneur, open up his cupcake shop, etc. His investors were black. His customers were black, primarily black women. And when he had his first opportunity, the first thing he did was try to abandon the base that built him for money. And we'll see this thing throughout, because some people are going to think I'm picking on him and like, but that was 10 years ago. Yes, it was. And he's still the same and doing the same today. He's just a lot more sophisticated in it. So it's not as obvious. He's not going to necessarily write things like this. He says a lot of shit, but he's not going to necessarily write things like this and do it in blatant ways where people really know. But he's still the same person. Period. But nevertheless, when the Cupcake Gallery actually opened and he was starting to get some business, the bulk of his business was not coming from that neighborhood. Those white women with those strollers were strolling right on past his store. Where the bulk of his business was still coming from was the black people who were supporting him and black women who were supporting him from the very beginning. But now they were traveling from the west side and from the south side and south suburbs, etc., all the way to where he was on the north side of Chicago. And that's how loyal they were to him. So at a certain point, he came out of his haze of worshiping the $300 stroller, and he began to pivot because he realized that his real moneymaker were those same black women that he was so quickly ready to abandon and said had no money, basically. And this was the start of where the narrative of Darius not liking black women kind of came from. And then it evolved from there because there's other situations. And then, of course, situation with his mother, all of that type of stuff. So this was starting to be the origin of that narrative. And based on the way he still treats black women today when they're not brushing his ego, I'm really starting to think there's some truth to it. But y'all let me know what y'all think. So before the Cupcake Gallery opened and he was doing some things to get it ready, because this particular location did not require as much work as the original location he was looking at, this was for me the first time where I had any business dealings with Darius where for me it required compensation, because up to that point I had never charged Darius for anything that I had ever done for him that utilized my skills, talents, things I did in my businesses, etc. I just always did it for free. However, the project that he wanted me to do at the Cupcake Gallery, which was to build a partition, a whole wall to separate and make the kitchen larger while separating the dining area, etc. For me, that was a major project, and the fact that it would take days and take time away from me being able to do other projects, that was a non-negotiable for me to do that for free for him. And so I told him that I would be charging because of the amount of time and materials. And this is where I saw Darius's cutthroat business nature surface for the first time. When I gave him my original estimate, which was way lower than I ever would have charged anyone else, he basically then tried to cut me down to panhandler types of payment. And at that point, because I did not need the job, did not need the money, it wasn't even any money, real money to talk about, I, at that point, was ready to walk away from the whole thing and just told him to get someone else to do it. It's fine with me. And eventually, I ended up doing it anyway, because what Darius did then was a pattern that I'm hearing that he's done since, and it's worked for him, is that he would underpay people for their services under the guise that they would get more business from working with him due to exposure, and he would recommend other people, etc. And so he pulled that on me, and I was like, you know what? I'm helping a friend out. He really needs it. He doesn't really know what he's doing when it comes to getting contractors to do this sort of thing. Let me go on and help him out. And in return, who knows, I might get a client or two out of it from them seeing my work. Well, of course, that last part never happened. And I know that he did the same thing with his designer of the restaurant, who gave him a really, I think it was Greens and Gravy, the designer of that, gave him a really, really good price. The contractor and the designer of that gave him a really good price to do that work under the same guise. And then he not only didn't pay them, but in addition, no future work came out of it, because it's all about him. It's never the plan. The plan is for him to part with as little money as possible. That's the plan. So long story short, I went through that same thing with him on a very small scale. Like I said, it was just a wall that I was building, painting, etc. Took a few days, knocked it out, and that was that. Moved on. Well, I moved on from that particular project and should have left it at that, never did nothing else. And at that point, I seen him in a different light than I had ever seen him in before. And I had decided I will never do any more work for Darius ever again. I was like, I'm done, never again, because that didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. And I would have never treated him that way on any level. So then we get again to the Cupcake Gallery. It's now open, it's operating. And from Darius's account, it's doing really well. From what he's telling everyone, from what he's posting on social media, it's doing very well. However, no one really knows how true that was, because no one actually ever saw his books. And Darius has always created an alternate universe when it comes to his online persona versus real life. And it honestly started way back then. Around the time that he opened the Cupcake Gallery, this is when he really started to push me away. And I think he never really wanted me to be that close to his business, because for one, he knew that I wasn't slow, and for two, I had a business background and was a serial entrepreneur myself with multiple businesses. So I'm pretty sure he knew, had I gotten close enough, I would have been able to sniff out the scamming of his business very quickly. And I do recall around that time hearing gossip from extended friends about the fact that Darius was up to no good with that Cupcake Gallery, but I didn't know any specifics, and it wasn't like anyone was laying it out the way that I am for you guys in this video series. I just started to really notice over time that many of the gay people in the Chicago scene were having disparaging things to say about him, and pretty much like they don't F with him, because a lot of people knew that he was shady, arrogant, and a straight up asshole. However, for the most part, except for the glimpses I've just explained, I was kind of protected from seeing that part of him, at least during that time. And I didn't start to really get my first experiences with his inner demons until the 9th year of knowing him. However, I do remember now, looking back, visiting him on quite a few occasions at the Cupcake Gallery during various times of day and night, just to visit him, hang out, conversation, keep him company, whatever, pretty much anytime I had a little free time. And I remember at a certain point it clicking that it was never busy in there no matter what time of day or night that I went. Yet on his social media posts, there would always be these posts about how great of a day it was with business, how crowded it was, how busy he was, what he's selling out of, etc. It was like this hype surrounding that gave you the perception that it was just a jumping spot. But then when you went, it was him most times in his office, which was right off of where the sales counter was, and he had a little display cabinet with some cupcakes, and that was pretty much it. And so I did notice that, but once again, and I really understand the D-wives more than people know, and that's why I think that's why I talk about them so much. It's because I get it, like that no matter what you hear and even see, it's sometimes hard to believe it. And that was exactly what I was doing with Darius. Like, I'm showing up, seeing from my own eyes that this place isn't as jumping as what he's saying and projecting, and I'm seeing it on social media myself, and then I'm showing up and I'm never seeing what he's talking about, but I'm giving benefit of the doubt, like maybe the crowd just left, like that was 15 minutes ago, maybe it emptied out, you know. It was crazy. And I'm not saying there was no customers, but when I hung out there was just sporadic, a person here or there, maybe 2 or 3 at a time max, but it was not a constant flow of customers the way that it was presented. However, this is also when I got my first introduction to social media management software. And my first introduction to it was Hootsuite, for those of you who don't know, because some of you don't know. Well, probably more of you probably don't know about it than know about it, because it's kind of specific to, businesses and influencers and stuff. So what it is a software that you use. Well, it's a website rather that you use, or app. And what you do is you can program your post to post whenever you want. So if I wanted to program post for the next year and every day have something coming out at various times throughout the day, and even making it look like I'm live and having things happening, you can do that. And so I know I learned about that through Darius, because I would see it and I'll see all this stuff, and he was scheduling stuff. And so he spent more of his time when I was there working in Hootsuite and scheduling posts to build up hype around him than actual working on the Cupcake gallery. Because the truth is, he came in, he baked the stuff in the morning, and I think that was pretty much it. So yeah, that's just a tidbit of like something I'm seeing now that I saw then, but ignored then because I was giving benefit of the doubt to a person I thought I knew, which is the same thing that the D-Wives are doing today. At least I knew the person in real life, so I think I get a little bit more credit for saying, like, it was just hard for me to believe or pay attention to everything else that was happening. And I do remember our friend group around the same time. It started to become more of the conversation because he was becoming more distant from the group, but yet, everyone was already following him on social media prior to even his start with the YouTube channel or anything else. And so there was starting to be a lot of the conversation from the friend group there were like 10 to 12 of us. Rumors were growing that his social media posts were not actually depicting what was actually happening in real life at his Cupcake gallery, or in general in some cases. And that's definitely still the case today. And also by this time, Darius was becoming less and less involved in our friend group. And I know some people will say that's because he was advancing and he was becoming greater than y'all and blah, blah, blah. And nobody in the group was a scrub. We're talking about professionals, 6-figure earners, etc. And so this wasn't a case of him outgrowing us in that way. He may have outgrew us, now looking back, in a way that he was plotting. He was plotting schemes and crimes and plans, and you got a group of a bunch of smart people you hang out with and knew you earlier on as well. And so I think it just became not a safe space for him to operate. And so we noticed the pull away. It was gradual, but we noticed it, and by the time that he fell out with me and his best friend over stealing from us, that's when it just completely eroded. And literally, he, to this day, talks to none of the, it was 12 of us back then. He talks to none of the 12 of us, which I think says a lot about him, not the 12 of us who all still talk to each other, even those who have moved away, etc. Like, none of us are not friends. So do with that information what you will. And speaking of scamming, it wasn't limited to just customers and some close friends and family and investors. Darius also had a handful of employees at the Cupcake Gallery sporadically, and more in the beginning, and then towards the end, nothing, basically. And so I heard like little stories here or there. I knew that there was some disgruntled people, but again, I was cool with Darius, and so I was mostly getting his version. Well, I was only getting his version, and everyone, of course, he twisted into them being the issue. There's one person who, through one of my social media posts, there was another associate who knew one of the employees who he did really wrong. Unfortunately, that person no longer lives in the country, so I wasn't able to get the details, but just for the sake of conversation, I'm gonna put it up, the post that I received from the associate friend that basically says that he did that particular employee bad. And I just know that he was unable to hold and maintain any employees. And I know that he loves today to put it all on all of the employees and act like there are just no good employees out there whatsoever. Anyone with common sense knows that that's just not true. Yes, some industries are harder than others to fill spots for. Yes, it takes a lot to manage people. I have managed many people on various levels, even in management and corporations and all of that. So I get it, but it's not impossible. And when you're running a business, you need people. It is what it is. But Darius does not have the ability and the people skills to work with people on that level. And so the Cupcake Gallery was starting to show that, but it was very small. So because of that, he was able to kind of pull off basically like he was pulling it off, but he really wasn't. Like looking back, he wasn't pulling it off even by himself. But because of his horrible people skills, he ended up having to run the Cupcake Gallery by himself. Meanwhile, this was also around the time that he had stolen our truck and tried to rebrand it, or did. He didn't try, he actually accomplished rebranding it into a different company. And he was trying to go out on those runs with the food truck. And because he didn't have staff, he would close the Cupcake Gallery during the hours that he was out on the food truck. And once again, this is a pattern that has not changed to this day. So we now can see, and you see this in his IG lives and the way he conducts his businesses, that he has supposedly the Carolina Pound Cake Company, which is closed. He keeps saying he's on pause with orders, but it's closed down by the state of Georgia. You then have the cookware line, you have the Dining with Darius's, and you have his cookbooks and all of that stuff. And so he's telling his customers who are having issues with their products and deliveries, etc., that I'll have to handle that later because I'm doing my Dining with Darius event today. I'll handle that next week. Like, it shouldn't happen like that. And that's a pattern of his where he shuts down or stops doing tasks for one business so that he could jump over to the other business, whichever one is bringing in the most money or has the biggest demand or requirement on him at the time. You cannot operate, especially the kind of businesses he's trying to run now, you can't operate that as a one-man show, not and be successful. And that is why, in part, that is why he has so many delivery and customer service issues, because why is he printing out shipping labels? Why is he even answering customer service calls about tracking numbers? And I shouldn't even say calls because there are no calls, but even the emails, and you constantly see people posting that they've sent him 3, 4, 5 emails and he's not responding. And then he gets on the IG lives and acts like that's where he conducts customer service, but everyone is not on Instagram, and they will have to catch you during the time you're on there, not necessarily what's convenient for them. Not to mention that the people who do inquire, you embarrass them, dox them, treat them like they're idiots. And so like, it's really, really crazy. And then the D-wives attack them because, they're blind. And so they're just going off of what he's saying, where he's trying to make it look like anyone who has an issue is the issue. It's just really, really crazy over there. So long story short, we see what was happening back then with the Cupcake Gallery and the food truck company and Local Holler and Fresh to Go. And I know I'm forgetting one, but he's trying to run all of those. Oh, Uptown Pies, and whatever else I might be forgetting. He's trying to run all of those simultaneously as a one-man show. Still doing it today. And of course you saw what happened with y'all don't know, I know. There's some people out here who know. But most of us, some of us, those of us in Chicago, I'll say that. Those of us in Chicago know what happened with those businesses. And I think it's a matter of time before, the other stuff is going to implode, possibly in the same ways. But honestly, even if not that, there's other explosions that are going to happen in his world. And speaking of employees, the other issue that he has is he's always saying that part of his issue with employees is that they're counting his money and that people are basically money hungry. And for one, I think he's projecting, because I have not seen that. But what I see is people actually just wanting a living wage from him when they are employed by him. And because he's a narcissist and alleged sociopath, it makes him unable to have empathy or sympathy to see other people's sides when it comes to that. So they're working for you, and many of these people are upholding your companies because you're not going to hire a ton of people because you are cheap and you want to do everything bare bones. So you have these dedicated people giving their all and basically sustaining your companies, and then you don't want to give them even just compensation. And that is where he runs into issues. And then he gets mad if someone's like, well, I can make more money at Amazon with what you're giving me. You know, it's that sort of thing. So because of who he is and his level of greed, he only sees through a lens of greed. And so he thinks that everyone is out for the same thing because that's his focus above anything else. And when you think about it, that's truly a sad existence if money is the root of your happiness. And as I said, while at the Cupcake Gallery, Darius was using Hootsuite to do all of these positive posts, basically showing an alternative universe of what was really happening over there. And it was basically like today, where he wanted to be able to continue to bamboozle existing followers while hopefully recruiting new customers. However, because at that point he hadn't completely mastered the art of deception using social media, he wasn't really able to suppress all of the negative comments about the poor customer service from him. And these weren't complaints about the former employees that he occasionally had before destroying the relationships with them. And one complaint that I definitely heard more times than I could actually count was about the oily cupcakes critiques. It eventually became a running joke that I would hear in different environments throughout Chicagoland. I even heard people teasing over time, calling them grease cakes or butter cakes. And it was true. Although I did love the cupcakes in the very beginning, they became so oily that I started not to have interest in them because they would mess up my stomach and I would literally feel sick after eating them. And I think it was because my body was trying to process all of that butter. And at the hefty price of, I think, about $50 for a dozen at that time, it didn't make me want to keep going back to buy more butter cakes. Yes, because I had to pay full price. And I say that because in the 4 or 5 videos I've done so far on this whole situation, I've mentioned a lot of things that came with the benefit of being my friend for free for him. And I honestly think the only time I got free cupcakes was when he had me try it for the first time, and maybe on a couple occasions where he might have made it with a meal or some event I was at. But that's honestly, I probably didn't have more than 3 or 4 literally free cupcakes from him, if that. I think I'm being generous. And that, good people, is the kind of person that Darius started to morph into after this millionaire by 30 idea got in his head. He was definitely counting every penny and no one was spared. And in his defense, I will have to say that Darius was not always like that, because the truth is, had he been like that, we would have never been friends, and definitely not a couple for 2 years. He was generally a pretty giving boyfriend, and even when we became friends, he would still occasionally treat me out to eat, or if we were shopping, going grocery shopping or something, and maybe I needed 1 or 2 things, you know, he would just be like, put it in my car, he would take care of it. So those were some glimpses into his redeeming character traits. And those sort of things that I still see today of his redeeming qualities are how many are still deceived into thinking he can't possibly be the predator that has garnered him the hashtag Darius Crooks. But that's what allows predators to lurk among us, because on the outside, they look, talk, and act like us. They aren't generally scary monsters from outside appearance. Otherwise, we would all stay away from them and they wouldn't have victims to be defined as predators. So they basically shapeshift to gain our admiration, love, and trust, so that we are primed and ready for them to strike to make us their next victim. And you'll see how Darius pulls this off daily in his IG lives and on social media in our future Surviving Darius Crooks videos. Just stay tuned. Now, another scam that we later found out was happening within the Cupcake Gallery scam was Groupon, the Groupon scam. So I'm gonna really go into depth on this one with some of the other larger corporation kind of scams that are out there. Like we have Eventbrite, Amazon, and some others. There's some others I'm like waiting on receipts for, so I ain't gonna mention it yet. But anyway, Groupon was a part of that. And in summary, what Darius was doing was working with Groupon, the way that companies work with them, offering discounts for the cupcakes, and people were purchasing through Groupon. However, when they were coming to his store in order to redeem their discounted cupcakes or whatever, Darius played whatever shenanigans and tricks that he played in order to not validate the purchases from Groupon. And so you had tons of upset people that had purchased through Groupons and was saying that they got scammed. Well, I think he did another one too, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a lot going on. My brain is foggy with all this stuff. It's a lot of information. But anyway, eventually Groupon ended up dissolving their relationship with Darius and barring him and any of his companies from dealing with them. Now, I don't know if that happened during the Cupcake Gallery thing or if that was one of the future businesses. I'll have to verify that because I can't remember off the top of my head. But I do know that Groupon will not work with him, along with some other major companies. So just wanted to cover that because that's a piece of this, and then I'll go in depth because I'm kind of, again, trying to be in chronological order of the events, but it's very hard. It's just really hard. Because again, like I told you, there's some other companies that stuff is coming out about that I can't really talk about yet because I need the receipts and also want to get the full story. So it's a lot. So anyway, now we're back to the Cupcake Gallery investors. So the business open, like he got the money, built out the place. I mean, did a few little, cleaning up and remodeling a little bit, freshening up some stuff. Moved into Cupcake Gallery. It is operating. He's now doing other scams and he's doing the social media scamming stuff and acting like the business is doing so great when it really wasn't. Now we get to the original investors. Now it is time for Darius to uphold his end of the bargain, which is he promised these investors that with their 1% investment or investment of $2,000 per 1% of share in the Cupcake Gallery, that they would then start to receive monthly payments with interest, and this would be their profit share basically. So fast forward some months, it is now time for him to pay him. And I don't think he had it that far out. I want to say he had it anywhere from 3 to 6 months out. He was then supposed to start paying them. And from what I remember, Darius did start making some payments to some investors. However, just like now with his current customers, he fulfilled his obligation on some level with some of them, and other investors he didn't. So some investors saw at least their original return come back, well, their original invested amount come back, and others saw nothing, and some saw partial, like half of what at least their original investment was. None of the investors saw their investment plus interest. As I said, he was supposed to continue to pay them monthly. And basically, once the Cupcake Gallery and Uptown Pies completely flopped, these investors no longer heard anything from Darius, whereas before he was giving them updates, sending them blog style emails, updating them on the going-ons, and basically blogging, for lack of a better word, of what was happening with trying to open it and his day-to-day with what was happening. And eventually, and it's basically a lot like what he still does today with his IG Lives. He loves to share. He's been doing blogs for like 20 years. And so he loves to share. He has to have that attention and engagement. And so now it's morphed into the daily IG Lives. Well, the multiple times per day IG Lives. This is an evolution of the same thing. Started out as blogging when no one knew who he was, morphed into a YouTube channel, morphed into him using social media more widely. And then eventually Periscope was where he was getting that daily dose of attention from his D-Wives. And now, once Periscope was gone, it morphed over to the IG Lives. Thankfully, because I wasn't on Periscope and I'm on IG. Anyway, after a few months, the investors were hearing nothing from Darius, no updates whatsoever. He had ghosted them, which is actually the same thing he does today with his products and some of his services, where he will deliver and fulfill for some of the people, and then others will not get those services or goods at all. And others will get ignored and blocked if they make any kind of fuss about any product or service that he hasn't provided or refunded. And the reason that it's done that way is so that it always allows for a level of benefit of doubt for those who did get their orders and did get the services or even a refund that they requested. Because then you'll have maybe some real life people saying, I don't know what the controversy is all about with Darius. I got my return. I got my second product that I ordered. I don't know what the big deal is, because that's not the Darius that I know. And if these particular comments aren't bots that he's bought and scheduled, which is possible too, if they're real, what they also don't know is that any large-scale scammer understands the rules to prolonging your scams. And in order to do that, you must deliver your products and services at least to a small percentage of your scam base, so that most of your victims have a lesser chance of actually being believed when they finally do speak out, because they will always run into the contradiction of those people who did actually get their products and services, because they're going to defend the fact that that wasn't their experience, not understanding that your experience, just like life in general, does not necessarily reflect, validate, or invalidate someone else's experience. I don't know why people don't understand that. Like, it's just beyond me. I had good parents, and so I can't then say that everyone in life had good parents. And if someone says they didn't have good parents, I'm like, no, that can't be, because I had good parents. Like, what? That's what y'all doing out there. It's ridiculous.
Are you dumb?
But unfortunately, the tactic works in suppressing and silencing the victims that try to call him out. And in Darius's case, he blocks them on all social media platforms. In some cases, he doxes them to his audience, giving private information, and then makes up lies and criticizes the people to his remaining audience so that they will also disengage with that person. And that part ensures that he never has to worry about that person being able to share their true real life experience with anyone who may hear them out and maybe actually believe them. And he started to develop those skills way back with the Cupcake Gallery investors, where he pretty much did the same thing to them. He blocked them on all social media platforms and eventually ghosted them. And even my friend who I spoke of earlier received a few payments from Darius. And when the first couple payments started to be late, he was reaching out to Darius. And initially, Darius was responding with excuses or reasons, etc. And my friend was giving him the benefit of the doubt before Darius completely ghosted him. And throughout that process, at that time, I was communicating with my friend and pretty much getting a play-by-play of his discussions and email. I think it was mostly email interactions with Darius regarding the situation. And I was doing whatever I could at the time to help. However, by that time, I was also starting to run into my own issue with Darius in regards to the food truck business that he pulled us into. And I then was having issues with him stealing from us. So I was at the point of just realizing how bad it was getting and the fact that we would likely have to look into litigation in order to recoup anything from him. Meanwhile, at a certain point, some of the investors of the Cupcake Gallery ended up banding together, finding each other, and they created a group where they were looking into a class action lawsuit. And I remember this clearly because Darius's now ex-best friend and I, the two that he scammed in the food truck business, we happened to be together that day, riding in the car doing something. And we got a call. One of us got the call from one of the investors, the Cupcake Gallery investors, because however they got our number, I don't even know. But they ended up knowing that we were close to Darius and all of that. And so they were reaching out to us for help in locating him because they were trying to get their money. And at that time, we told them we didn't even know where he was at that point because he was renting from that friend who was with me, the best friend. He was renting an apartment in his building. But at that point, Darius had left. So we had no idea where Darius was at that point. So we didn't know really how we could help the group. We didn't have anything to help them really with besides some information. And what we later realized was why we didn't know where Darius was because he had ran off to New York by that time. And so I remember specifically it was the guy who called us, who his story was so sad because he said that he had actually invested his daughter's college tuition, like she was going away this freshman year, and he used her tuition money and trying to make more of it because it was a guaranteed investment. He just knew that he was getting that money back. He had done his calculations, and with Darius running off with his money, that was now affecting his daughter's ability to be able to start college that semester. So it was, and this is like one of the many stories I've heard of how what a lot of people want to write off as, oh, he was young and he made some mistakes. They want to write it off as that, but there were some lives that were destroyed, and even of recent. Like, this is real, y'all. This is a predator for real. So anyway, long story short, we gave them the information we could. And again, at that point, I was gathering information for our attorney. I don't know if maybe we was headed to meet with the attorney that day. Now that I think about it, I think that might have been why we were together. That's funny. I think that's why we were together that day. It's kind of coming to me. And so I had already started, or we had started gathering all of the documentation, text messages, etc., so that we could take to the attorney and, you know, get his insight into or consult of what the situation was. So yeah, that was the last that I heard anything about the Cupcake Gallery investors. But in summary, the whole Cupcake Gallery investor situation was a scam. And I don't know if he started out as a scam. That I cannot say 100%. But it was definitely a scam because people did not get what they were promised. And at a certain point, he knew what he was doing, for sure. The other piece of it is that what Darius did was completely illegal and is considered a federal crime. And that's even had he paid the investors their money back. This was illegal. In addition, although he promised them ownership in the company, he never actually filed with the state of Illinois to make them owners based on whatever percentage of investment they gave him, which would have been required. And so Darius was still 100% owner of the Cupcake Gallery. So once again, breaking terms of the contract, which again, and I said in another video, he does not abide by contracts. He does not believe in contracts. He'll sign them, but he's not going to abide by them. So good luck with that. So longer story short, and I didn't get into the weeds with the investing. If you guys are interested in stuff like that, this stuff is going on Twitter. Just search hashtag Darius Crooks. You'll see more than your eyes can take on. You'll spend days, literally days, reading all of the stuff that's on there. And also on some of the other platforms now, but definitely Twitter and maybe Instagram a little bit more. But definitely Twitter is where it's at. That's where it's at. So with that, this video and all of this that's going on, this whole series and what you might see on social media, I'm having a lot of sidebar conversations. You know, I get some trolls here or there where people think that this is just all about ish and giggles or just stirring up some internet drama. This is so much bigger than that. We do that for attention because you got to make people talk about it, to get attention, all of that good stuff. However, there's real work happening with this. And so if you know anyone who invested in the Cupcake Gallery in Chicago, this is a video for them. Please share it with them. Please share it in general so that the word will get out, because maybe you don't know anyone, but you might share it, and then someone who knows someone or someone who was an investor may see this video, because this may finally be the opportunity for them to finally get their money and maybe a little bit more. So the call to action for this video is that any investors of the Cupcake Gallery, or what I didn't get into in this video, which is the Cupcake Gallery cake mix or cupcake mix, if you or anyone was a Chicago investor who bought shares or invested in his companies in any other way, meaning Darius Crooks or Darius Cooks, or I'm sorry, Darius T. Williams, his legal name, and that's probably what you would have had. Yes, that's the name that you would have had on those documents, because he wasn't known as Darius Cooks back then. So yes, Darius T. Williams, if you did any business dealings with him back in Chicago, what you would need to do is contact the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to file a complaint. Make sure that you have your documents ready, whatever proof that you have, contracts, etc., emails, text messages, whatever you might have to prove that you actually did invest with him. You want to provide that to them and be ready to share your story. And I'll have the link to the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission in our description area below, as well as I'm going to try to remember to pin it in our comments section. And you can click on that and basically follow the directions. And again, make sure you have all of your documents. And again, please make sure to share this information. Share this video, and then people can watch it and get the gist of it, and hopefully share it with more people so that we can get some kind of retribution for those people who were harmed a decade ago. And we're working on that on so many other levels as well. So with that, we have made it through yet another video. And this one I feel like, because I know that there's so much more that I couldn't fit in here. There's some things I took out that I'm gonna have to cover in a different way, or just, yeah, it's a lot. And so trying to wrap my mind around how to get this out to you guys in the best way possible, and it kills my perfection paralysis. It really, the perfectionist in me is grieved with the fact that this is a moving target and I can't package it the way that I would want to. But eventually this will be over, and I guess I should look at it that way. Eventually this will be over, and then maybe I'll be able to package it all in a more concise way when it's a movie. But anyway, with that, if you've made it to this point in the video, first of all, thank you. Please comment below if you've made it this far. Hashtag Darius Crooks. Yes, hashtag Darius Crooks. Also, I don't know, I ain't got to say all that other stuff. You already know what to do. With that, until next time, of course, there are more of these coming. Some other stuff too, because I need a break. I need to take a breather and do some other content. But with that, until next time, until I upload the next video, make sure to take care and be blessed. Peace.
That's fine. What law I broke? Well, tell me what rule, what law did I break?
Popping like I'm supposed to. Watch out for the people that ain't close to. Speak a little something you could toast to. I ain't tryna hear about what you won't do. Moving like I'm meant to. Hit the ground running like the rent do. Speak a little something that you're into. I ain't tryna hear about what you been through.